guys, so usually, basically what we're going to be talking about here is watersheds, defining what a watershed is. And in order to do that, we kind of have to understand maps to some degree. So basically what we're looking at here, if you were in class, what I would have you do is I would I basically just make fun of myself the whole time. So this here is a map. Let me move this up a little bit so you can see it. This here is a map of Coach Trow's youth. Basically, my parents used to send me in the summers, me and a group of friends and brothers' friends, to our babysitter 2 to 3 times a week. So basically, the parents got together and decided, the best way to take care of the kids was to pawn them off on Six Flags or Wet and Wild, which you guys now probably know is Hurricane Harbor. I think that's still the name. I don't know. It might be something different altogether now. But anyway, basically one parent would drop us off, and then another parent would pick us up after work. So we'd be stuck at Six Flags or Hurricane Harbor all day. So we didn't really need maps because we knew where everything was. We got so used to it. But notice that they did have maps. And I remember as a kid, maybe the first time I ever went to Six Flags with my parents, they were kind of looking at the map, trying to figure out where stuff was, or even finding the map kiosk to figure out where stuff was. And so usually what I have you do when you're here in class, here's Hurricane Harbor, is I usually have you just answer some questions about it. And if you notice on these maps, this map really doesn't have any kind of legend or anything that helps you with information. But then this map has all sorts of information, which really isn't a lot of information either. But this legend here kind of gives you what the height requirements are of the different rides, so at least you know if you can ride it before you walk all the way over there, which is kind of helpful. And then it also gives where it's located in the world. But basically, I give you questions about how to get from one place to another, and you actually look at these maps and figure all that out. And the questions pretty much are real broad because there's not a lot of information on these maps. And so we kind of just explore through that, and then you guys talk about how the maps are helpful, which they basically just show you directionality and where things are. The Hurricane Harbor one tells you a little bit more, what size you have to be to ride it. But then they're also not real helpful. It doesn't tell you how far the walk is from one to another, right? And so we need a little bit more information. And so then we transition kind of to where we find a better map, and this is Rocky Mountain National Park. And let me just kind of move down so you can see some things on this map too that you can't really see on the screen. But basically, this map shows us a lot more information in terms of it tells us where certain things are located within the key here. It also tells us what types of roads we're looking at here. And then there's hiking trails, and then it'll also tell us if we're in glacial area, alpine tundra, or forest or meadow, which may or may not be particularly important to you at the moment. But the most important part is that we have a map scale down here, which you may not be able to see it because of my toolbar down here. But it does have miles underneath that as well. So again, I give you kind of another general idea of mapping here, and I ask you questions because this is a true story for me. Basically, I went to Colorado. Rocky Mountain National Park is just outside of, it's about an hour north of Denver, and then if you drive an hour north, then you also have to drive about 30 minutes west to actually get to Rocky Mountain National Park. It's actually in Estes, Colorado, which is, if you've ever seen the movie The Shining, that's where that movie was filmed. Anyway, I went there several years back for a fishing trip, and stayed at a friend's house that I knew from high school, and then planned a day to go fishing, but then also I was going to meet back at a certain point to do kind of a picnic lunch with them. And so basically I asked you a bunch of stuff. I had essentially two choices to make. So I'm going to go back and just kind of show you, just so this kind of makes sense. Basically I could drive. So he lives way over here somewhere, but so basically I would drive into Estes Park, which is this area, and then you go up here into the actual Rocky Mountain National Park. But I had two choices where I could go and fish. The first choice was up at Ypsilon Lake, which is right here. Let me move this up just a little bit. Ypsilon Lake right up here. And then my other choice was to actually not even go into Estes Park, but I would come up here to Cow Creek, and I would fish Cow Creek. And basically you could park and then essentially start fishing Cow Creek. And you'd fish it probably up to Bridal Veil Falls-ish, maybe a little bit past there to Black Canyon. But basically you the trail follows the river, and you could fish that most of the way. So I had those two options, but then we were going to meet with my friends, and my wife was on the trip with me, but she wasn't going fishing with me because she didn't really like to do that. But we were going to meet over here at this parking lot at the Alluvial Fan. So basically right here where this little semicircle is, right? And we were planning to meet there at about 1 o'clock. So my thought was, as I looked at this map, my thought was, okay, so let me look at how far. So, here's our 3 kilometers down here, which, kilometers roughly equates to miles, right? It's like 1.6 kilometers per mile, but so this is like 2 miles or whatever. So anyway, if you lay out this parking at the Lawn Lake Trailhead, because you have to take Lawn Lake Trail up to Ypsilon Lake. If you work this out, you usually travel somewhere about I would say 4 miles of a hike to the lake, and then you start fishing, right? And by the way, there's no fish in this roaring river right here. So the reason that I didn't throw that as an option is because I went to a place and they told me Ypsilon Lake is a good fishing lake, so you could go up there and fish. So I could walk up there about 4 miles, or I could come over here, park at Cow Creek, and then essentially fish as soon as I got out of the car. And I would fish my way up about 4.5 miles, something like that, and then I could turn around and fish my way back down. But then notice that this drive right here, I would have to make all the way back to be here at 1 o'clock. So essentially that's like a 14-mile drive, which if you know anything about this area, 14 miles, it takes a lot longer than about 14 minutes, because these are not the greatest of roads. So this is an unpaved road actually right here, right? Notice that the unpaved road, and then it hooks up with a regular old road, but that regular old road, when it gets into Estes Park, it's pretty slow moving here, and sometimes as you're traveling along this road, there's elk in the way. It's a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. There could be any kind of animals on the road that don't particularly want to move real fast. So one day when we were just out driving from about this point in Estes Park, where'd I go? Come back. So one day while we're driving from about this point at this lake in Estes Park, it took us 30 minutes to get just from here all the way up to this area up here where this lunch was going to be. And it doesn't look like it would be that far, and it's not that far, but just because of how slow people drive in the park, it takes a while to get there, and then animals being on the road and people stopping to take pictures and all that kind of stuff. So I knew that it might be an hour drive to get from there back over to here, so that means I'd have to be done fishing at noon. It's about a 4-mile fishing thing, so really I would want to get there really early in the morning. So I was thinking to myself, okay, I'll try to get there at about 7. That leaves me 4 hours to fish, and then I would need to be heading back towards the trailhead to get to the car and head back. If I were to go up here, I'm thinking 4 miles, you basically roll back down to the parking lot that's right there. So you're already pretty much there, so you kind of get to save some time. But you do have to hike without being able to fish to get to the lake where you can fish. But so in kind of the questions, I asked the kids to make a choice based on that, what they want to do, and they measure these out themselves and get used to using the map and everything, and eyeball, how long it would take to do certain things. And I asked you guys to kind of make the decision that I had to make. And then, so you're either going to go fish Cow Creek or you're going to go fish Ypsilon Lake and then be back at the alluvial fan for the picnic at 1 o'clock. So I actually decided, and I tell this to you guys, that I decided, hey, why not try both, right? So my plan was to wake up early in the morning, in fact, a little bit earlier than I was initially thinking, drive out to Cow Creek Trailhead, and if it was crowded, so if it looked like the parking lot was crowded, then that means that there's going to be a lot of people fishing. So I might, at that point just go back to the lake. So make the drive back here, then hike to the lake, fish, then come back to the parking lot. So I decide I'm going to do that, and so I roll into here at about 7 o'clock, a little bit before 7 actually, and about a quarter mile before I get to the parking lot, there are cars everywhere. And those cars are there most likely to fish because I see people getting fly fishing gear out of their trunk, putting on waders, that type of thing as I'm driving in. So I am a quarter of a mile out and there's already people parking along the road where you're not supposed to park. So I know that it's already crowded and I know that people are there to fish. So I immediately decide this ain't going to be it. So I turn around and I head back over to here. So now by the time I get over here, it's about 8 o'clock and I start hiking. So I park right here at the Lawn Lake Trailhead and I start climbing these trails, right? And I start going and going and going and going and going. And when I get about right here, which this is a potential shortcut that I noticed on the map that I was like, well, hey, if I'm running a little late, I could probably just jog down this, and get to the parking lot. But I got about right here and I realized that this map also sucks. And so this map has some features on it that kind of allude to that, but if you're not paying attention, it's kind of like the Hurricane Harbor one. Remember the Hurricane Harbor had the legend that said, these rides are for this tall. Well, these glacier, alpine, tundra, and forest meadow keys right here are actually pretty important because if I were to go up to Ypsilon Lake, I would quickly find out that I'm not tall enough to ride that ride if I were just looking at this map, because Ypsilon Lake is in alpine tundra, which means that you're at an altitude where trees no longer grow. So in this forest meadow area, this green area here, there's trees, there's forests, there's meadows, but then as you hit this area up here, it turns into alpine tundra, which is an area that's in an altitude where trees can't grow, which means that you're really, really, really high in the air. So this map was awful. Now, fortunately, I had another map with me that I had bought from the fishing area that basically would help me out. And the map looked a little bit more like this. And this map, let me see if I can blow this up for you so you can see it. Let me move this one out of the way just so that this is a little bit bigger. So this map right here showed me the error of my ways, and that'll be good right there. So let me just show you this map. Hang on, where'd it go? Okay, so here is the map, and this is Lawn Lake Trailhead, and it's kind of blown up, and this map is way more detailed than that other map. Okay, and this one shows me the error of my ways, because remember I told you that when I got to right here, I realized my problem. So basically I started down here at the parking lot of Lawn Lake Trail. Hang on. And that parking lot, if we look at all of these lines on here are what are called contour lines. And those contour lines tell us what elevation above sea level you are in feet. So right here, this benchmark tells us that we're at 8,578 feet. And a benchmark is actually a metal plate that they've stuck in the ground for surveying purposes, where they actually tell you what that is, geographically using very detailed instruments. And then the map from there shows you what the terrain, which is slope and aspect, which we'll talk about a little bit later, from that area. So if we look at this, we're at 8,500 feet roughly, right, above sea level in the parking lot at Lawn Lake Trail. Then I did these series of zigzags here, and the map doesn't really do it justice. It was 5 where you go back and forth, and those are called switchbacks. And the reason they have switchbacks is because you are going up in elevation, and it would be too steep to climb if you just climbed straight up. So you go back, 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 so that you get up the side of a cliff, basically, by walking back and forth up the face of that cliff. So notice that we go from 8,570 feet, right, to right here is 9,250, and then each little darker line is going to be another 250 feet. So this would be 9,000 coming back down towards the parking lot. So basically, after these switchbacks, you go from 8,500 to 9,200 feet, or 9,000 feet. So it's about 500 feet straight up, okay? Which you might be thinking, well, how high is that? That's a 50-story building that I basically went from the parking lot up to just get to this point here. And when I looked out over the parking lot, I was like, huh. And that, by the way, was about, right on here. It looks like you just go right there and it's a quick walk, but really that actually took me quite a bit of time, because it ends up being about a quarter of a mile, because you're going back and forth up to this point, right? And then you walk along this beautiful little edge of the trail that overlooks everything out this way, right? It overlooks this river meadow here, so you can kind of see it. And then you kind of turn the corner, and this hill actually shades you when you're down in here, because you're right next to this roaring river. And by the way, I know why they call it roaring river, because the elevation change here goes from 9,500 feet all the way down to 8,500 feet here. So it drops 1,000 feet in whatever distance that is there, which is not very far, about 3 kilometers. So this is basically pretty good rapids on this river. There's actually a bridge that takes you across here. And again, I went across that bridge and I came up to here. And right here, I'm at 9,500 feet. And that's when I made my realization that I was in trouble. And I actually pulled out this map and started looking at it. And I realized that, oh my God, I am 1,000 feet above this parking lot. So I'm 100 stories above this parking lot that I have to be at. And it's already taken me about 2.5 hours to get to this point. It's now 10 o'clock. I've got to be back here at 1. I am thinking to myself, wow, I still have to go all this way, which is about 4.5. This little 4.5 right here is the mileage from this point. So I'm about 4 miles out from being up at this lake, right? So I realized that in order for me to go up here, fish, and then make the trek back, I'm not going to have time. So my plan now is I could go back. It would take me about an hour. It's already 10 o'clock. I would be back down here at about 11. Then I'd have to kill like 2 hours waiting for them. So my thought now became, well, I'm not fishing, so I might as well hike and enjoy the sights, right? So I start trucking. So from 9,500 feet right here, I basically walk up this ridge, and if you notice, way up here, you're at almost 11,000 feet. So right here, if you follow this line, this is 10,750, and if you follow it around, it is just above Ypsilon Lake. So Ypsilon Lake is at 10,000 feet, 10,500 feet, right? So I'm basically going from 8,500 10,500 feet to 10,500 feet in a hike that is over 5 miles. Okay, so if you plotted that out, it's basically walking up stairs for 5 miles, which is essentially what I did. And notice there's areas where these lines become further apart. Those are kind of flatter areas. But then there's areas where those things go up pretty quick. And so this whole face here, because the lines are kind of spread out from each other, is relatively consistently flat. And then areas like this, where the lines are really close together, that means you're falling off a cliff, right? So this area right here, to get from here down to here, you could do that shortcut right there of 1,000 feet. It'd probably take you about 3 or 4 seconds, and you would be dead at the bottom if you made it to the bottom and didn't get hung up in a tree, because that's basically a cliff right there. So anyway, I started trucking. I was flying up this hill. Somewhere about this point, I realized I'd made another mistake. I thought it was, short trip. I'd be back at lunch to see my friends and everything, so I didn't pack water. And at altitude, you tend to lose water faster. It's also a drier climate, so you lose water faster. So I was pretty parched. And then not only that, I'm not used to living at altitude, so my body is not conditioned for this. So I also start getting lightheaded. So it was really just a bad idea. But I tell you what, I run up this sucker and I get to the lake. I look at it. It is about 12 o'clock, and I think to myself, good God, I got to get back down. So I start trucking back down, and I start flying. I get to about here, and I think, man, I'm going to be late. I'm going to need to call my folks and let them know. Well, there comes my next mistake. There is no cell reception inside Rocky Mountain National Park, so I can't call and tell them, hey, I'm going to be late. So they're either going to think I'm dead or gone if I show up late. So now I really know that I have to book it, and I figure that I can at least, if I get down to here, I can yell down to them, right? But so I start booking. I get down to here. I look. They're not there. It's almost 1, but not quite. So I start trucking. I fly through here, get back down to here. I look from here, and I can still see that they're not there yet. And I finally book. I get to the parking lot. I drive my car over to this parking lot, and I park. And they're not there. It's about 1:30, 1:45, right? And I'm thinking, crap, did I miss them? So I wait about 15 more minutes, and they show up at 2:30. So they're late an hour and a half to our picnic, and I just did basically a 4-hour hike in what would normally be a day hike up to this Ypsilon Lake, and I did not fish. So their first question out of the car, because they don't know this, their first question coming out of the car is, how was the fishing? To which I replied, well, I won't tell you what I replied, but you can imagine which of the 5 I might choose, and told them about the error of my ways. We talked about it, the hike, though, and how pretty it was, and how they should go do it sometime, my friend, because they live out that way. But I did not fish that day. And so the next question was, so are you gonna go back up there and fish? And I was like, no, because if I went back up there at 3 o'clock, it would be dark by the time I got up there, and I didn't have camping gear, and I wasn't going to make that hike at night coming back home. So that was a definite negative. So instead what I did was I came down to this little creek that runs through this. It's called Falls Creek, but it runs through Falls Meadow. But anyway, I came just basically and parked back over here, and then walked across this little meadow, and then I fished this creek. And I actually caught a few trout in there, but the thing that was awesome about that is, by the time we're done eating is 3:30, and in Colorado, if you've ever been out there in the summertime, 3:30 is typically about the time that thunderstorms start firing up and then coming over ridges. So this whole area got a thunderstorm that came through it, and that was pretty fun because you got to stop fishing, and so the thunderstorm comes, and lightning at altitude is kind of scary. So I ran back over here to the trailhead where there was a little restroom facility, and sat there and waited out through what they call soft hail, which is basically just hail, but they term it soft hail because it's small. But anyway, bottom line, it was an awful day. Other than getting to fish here a little bit, it was a pretty awful day. I did get a great workout that day running up the hill, which is called a mountain. But notice that this area about 11,000 feet is where that alpine area starts, and that's where trees don't grow because there's not enough oxygen for them. So trees don't grow up there, and I was up above the oxygen levels for tree growth. But anyway, what I learned that day, though, was that growing up in the flat plains of Texas, I never really knew or understood the importance of certain information on maps. I mean, I'd always seen maps, it's better if you have mileage marks, right? But it's when you're in certain areas, it's better to have these topo marks, these contour lines. And this is a topographic map. Topo basically is I can't remember what topo stands for. I'll have to update you on that later. But graphic usually is pertains to drawing or writing of maps. So it's usually, I think it may be topo, maybe line. So it's basically a line map that shows you the change in elevation. And the way you use it is the bold lines will be numbered, and then you can basically use those bold lines. This one's 1050 or 10.5, so 10,500. Then this one here is 10,250. So if we're moving from here to here, we're going downhill. And then if we're moving from here to here, we're going downhill because it goes from 10,500 to 10,250 to 10,000. So each jump on the bold line is worth 250. So you can also figure out what it is to go from the small lines. If this was 10,500, then we'd be going by 50s because it would be 10,450, 10,400, and then it's kind of hard to see, but 10,350, then 10,300, and then 10,250. So there's always 4 ticks in between. It's a little easier maybe to see in between over here. If you follow the lines around, these lines basically connect with each other at some point, and you'll find a number on them somewhere. And if you don't find a number, like for instance this one, then you can still figure it out because this is 10,250, this is 10,750. So this in between would be 10,500. So uphill is this way, downhill is this way, which brings you to the next point, which is these rivers. So these rivers actually flow. If this is 10,500 up here, this is 10,200 right here, then this would be 10,000 here. So this is flowing downhill, right? So topographic maps have contour lines that show you elevation changes or elevation above sea level at a certain point on those particular maps. So not all maps have everything that's great to have. Some maps don't have enough information on them for the job at hand. In this case, I thought I was well suited with that other map, but I didn't realize that elevation was going to be an important part, being that you're in the mountains. So this topographical map would be much better for that situation. Believe it or not, there's topographical maps out here. You can actually look at topographical maps of our area at Ryan High School, and the hill that's out back by the football field is it's about a about a 50 foot elevation change. So what you see on those typically is the numbers between here are a lot different. So ours, from this line to the next line might be a 50 foot deal, and then each line in between is only 10 feet. And so again, you can kind of see the terrain of the area. So terrain is really important when we're talking about waters and watersheds. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Basically, we have to know the terrain because if we know the slope and we can tell which way things are going, right, then we can tell uphill versus downhill, and water follows gravity. So gravity is downhill. So the number one thing that you need to notice from this is you need to understand how to read a topographical map and then how that relates to where water will flow. So this was a really long video. I apologize for that. There's going to be a practice there that I'll give you, that then I'll also give you where you can click on practice and then click on answers, and then I'll give you a quiz after that where you'll have to read a topographical map. So too long again on this, I'm sorry, but it has to be said. And then I thought you would enjoy my awful story about fishing in Colorado for one of the very first times that I've ever been there. Turned out to be a nice hike, but really wasn't a great day for fishing. So next up, we'll be talking a little bit more about watersheds and how we define them and delineate them, and then how water kind of gets in and out of them. So for now, though, we're just going to stick on topographical maps, terrain, contour lines, change in elevation, know how to read them, and you should be good to go.